talked about how he wanted to end a factionalism that has bedeviled us, and he would not be suspending MPs just for disagreeing with him. This has been a major gripe of backbenchers, of MPs, of the way that Keir Starmer and the people around him treated them.
Well, there you go. That was Andy Burnham's speech. He talked about giving people their hope back, said it was a last chance for Labour to change things, said he would fix the big things. He obviously paid tribute to Keir Starmer and cited his achievements. Will it be known as the 5 things speech? He set out the 5 goals, and to a certain extent, I think it does give a definition of Burnhamism. He said the end of factionism might be a bit navel-gazing there, the end of insidious briefing, which I found a bit ironic given there's endless briefing about who might be his Chancellor. He made it clear he hasn't decided yet. He talked about a new politics working with other political parties to make change where he could. But he said that Labour had to have a clear political direction. That was a third thing. Know where we stand, know where we've made wrong turns. Realise that political power has been centralised and economic power has been privatised. He said he would be a Prime Minister for all the places of the United Kingdom, the North, the South, the East and the West, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And he reprised his devolution agenda as well, power back to the places where you live, things like council houses, but he also talked about being very pro-business and very pro-education. Let me read you Michael's text. It's a good speech by Andy and a good list of achievements 2 years into a Labour government. He didn't mention the 82% drop in legal immigration, 40% drop in small boats crossing. As a Blue Labour supporter, I despair the Burnham government will play into reforms-only policy. Do Labour ever listen and pay attention to ordinary people? I read that out because that is literally, as far as I'm aware, the only positive text I've received during that speech. And the tone of it is that it's too self-congratulations. It sounds like he's giving an Oscar speech. What a load of self-regarding, humble bragging, says Daniel. Listening to Burnham, I have to say, so far, nothing new, nothing inspiring, says Josh. Michael, what a load of wet, windy nothingness. That's not me being partisan. That is me giving you a flavour of how you, as a Times Radio listener, have reacted. Maybe we have an audience that skews a certain way, but overwhelmingly, people thought it was a kind of empty speech and a bit too self-congratulatory. That's an instant reaction. Ollie Cole, you've been listening to the speech. What do you unpack a bit of it for us about what it says about the Burnham agenda?
Yeah, I think the speech, a lot of it was, and this is the difficulty in why you've got those people making those comments, is that this was a speech very much to the Labour Party. It really wasn't a speech that went much further than the room he was in. You know, it was about Labour values, it was about Labour voters, and it was about coming together as a party. I agree with you, Ed. It sort of will stick in the craw a little bit for some Labour members, and particularly some followers of Keir Starmer, the amount of praise they heaped on Keir Starmer, and also said that he'd backed every Labour leader along the way, when we know that a close ally of his, Louise Haigh, mentioned quite recently they've been planning for this moment for about a year. So there's some difficult things in there. There are, in terms of shaping an agenda, some interesting points. The pro-business leader, I will be a pro-business leader of the Labour Party as I was a pro-business mayor of Greater Manchester, is interesting given the context that, of course, we've had over the last couple of days over who might be walking into number 11 for him. I think the idea that Andy Burnham, for most sensible people and sane people, that he's not actually yet picked his cabinet or indeed made some decisions, it sounds a little bit like it's for the birds. It's perfectly acceptable not to announce them, but to stand up there and say you've got a plan and you're ready to take on governing the nation, but you haven't actually picked the people who are going to do it for you yet, would be quite an interesting place to end up. But you could hear there that he was trying to address some of the concerns that have come up over the last few weeks since he won in Makerfield and gave that speech about number 10 North. You know, he was very, very clear about being a politician that represented all four corners of Great Britain and the United Kingdom. He talked about going to Gravesend later and hearing people there. He was very, very keen to talk about other parts of the country when, of course, there has been this sort of criticism about him and the slight concern about an administration of his that it would focus too much on the north and not reflect the problems felt elsewhere. So there's quite a lot in there. It was pretty lengthy, probably longer than we thought it might have been. been. But it was, I think, a speech to the Labour Party. The difficulty now, and this is displayed by, the messages that you've just been reading out, is how does he turn that message away from a room full of Labour members, the people who are going to turn up at a ballot box pretty much every general election and back his party, whoever is in charge. How he's going to turn that towards the country on Monday when he gives his first speech as Prime Minister in Downing Street. And I thought, interestingly, the one, despite taking a pop at quite a lot of Labour governments of the past, the one Labour leader he sort of praised and heap praised on was Neil Kinnock, who was in the room, who a lot of people in the Labour Party admire, but of course never managed to win a general election.
Absolutely.
So that's going to be a big challenge.
Ollie Cole, absolutely, and it's a very good point. He's been elected Labour leader, so he's speaking to the Labour Party, and he praises Neil Kinnock, David Blunkett, and Margaret Becker. Let's go to our political editor Anna Mikhailova, who was in the room, I think, at the TUC and has been listening to the speech. Tell us, give us your take, Anna, on that speech and how it's gone down and what you thought.
Well, it's gone down very positively in the room. I mean, he came in to a standing ovation. There was, you've already mentioned the people who gave shout-outs to. There were also very supportive MPs, some of which we've spoken to, who are clear that they think this is what the party needs, that he is the man to save it from its polling doldrums. And, I mean, in terms of the speech itself, he was obviously keen to strike a conciliatory tone. He praised Keir Starmer and praised Keir Starmer's record, and then went on to set out these 5 different ways that he says he will be different, and a lot of it, in the detail of it, will be music to the ears of his party. So specifically, it was very noticeable that he began by saying that he would change the culture of the way he did politics. He talked about how he wanted to end the factionalism that has bedeviled us, and he would not be suspending MPs just for disagreeing with him. This has been a major gripe of backbenchers, of MPs, of the way that Keir Starmer and the people around him treated them. So it's notable that Andy Burnham put that as his first thing that he would do differently. And then, I mean, look, they're very, very big promises. So he says he's going to build a whole new politics. He says that he's going to fix social care. That was the one policy example that he gave that was quite specific. And change political direction, and of course represent all places. The big question, of course, is how. He did say that he would be setting out detail from next week onwards, and of course we are still waiting for those cabinet positions which he claims he still has not fully decided upon. But I think, the point of this speech was, as he likes to put it, it's a circuit breaker. It's to try and say, I'm going to completely change how things are done internally as well as in terms of messaging.
And there's a view taking hold that he's avoiding scrutiny. He's not taken questions today. Is this a conscious strategy?
Well, of course it's a conscious strategy. I mean, we have every member of the press pack here, and there were no questions at the end. But, I mean, what the Labour Party says is, for their leadership announcements, that is not, they wouldn't normally. I think the broader question is less today, and the fact that there have been very few chances for questions, and obvious concerted attempt to do more of questions from the public, these kind of other ways of doing media, more a greater focus on social media. And he made the point just now that he wants to do more of what he did in Cardiff yesterday, which was sitting, taking questions from the public. But it's interesting. It'll be interesting how that actually. We've seen prime ministers who want to be more in touch with the public. Remember, David Cameron was very keen to walk to work. Boris Johnson wanted to cycle to work. Sometimes the realities of the office doesn't mean that is quite possible. But we'll see. Andy Burnham is clearly keen to do that more. We know he'll be travelling around the country more over the summer, and I think we'll see more of those moments.
And removal vans are arriving in Downing Street this morning, I'm told. Take us through what will happen on Monday.
Yes, so I mean, the slight quirk of how things work, because Keir Starmer has picked Friday, and of course it was Keir Starmer that set out this timetable alongside the Labour Party and the way it picked its leadership schedule. So by choosing Friday for this announcement, it means that the handover of actual power in Downing Street can't happen until Monday, because the convention is that they have to go to the King on the next working day. So we'll have this slightly surreal situation where Keir Starmer is no longer Labour leader anymore, but he is Prime Minister for another weekend. And of course, he had hoped to use that weekend to go to America, to New Jersey on Sunday. That's not quite the case. I suspect he might want to be in Chequers or for one last time. And then Monday, what will happen is we will have the Prime Minister, the outgoing Prime Minister, give his final speech on the steps of Downing Street. Then he'll travel to the palace. He'll tender his formal resignation to the King. Then the King will invite Andy Burnham to come for a meeting and form his new government. And then we'll get Andy Burnham going into Downing Street, after which we will see all the appointments for the main cabinet jobs.